Hi everybody, happy Tuesday. I hope you're having a really good Tuesday. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about photosynthesis, looking a little bit deeper into it. So bring it back to our driving question. Remember, our driving question for this unit is, how do plants get the matter and energy that they need, right? So today, more specifically, we're going to focus on energy. So if we move on over to this third box here, we're going to look at the mechanism for how plants capture this energy, okay? And as I'm going through this video, you guys might want to take some notes. I would suggest doing that for your quiz next week. You can do this in doodle boxes D and E on your doodle sheet if you want to. You can just cross out what it says there. We're not going to do what it says there. Or if you have a different place that you like to take notes, you can do that too. Doesn't matter. But a place to take notes could be doodle box D and E. Okay, so moving forward, we're looking at how plants capture this energy. So we know that there are two transfers of energy in photosynthesis. We learned that from the simulation, right? So that means usually that there are two chemical reactions, right? We learned that from the chemical reactions unit, that every time there's a chemical reaction, there's some type of transfer of energy, so that should mean that there's two chemical reactions. Well, actually, in photosynthesis, more specifically, there's two main stages. So there's actually a series of small chemical reactions that take place in these two main stages. So the first one is light-dependent reactions, and that is where light is required. And the second one is light-independent reactions, where light is not necessarily required. Today we're going to look at this first one, light-dependent reactions, okay? The part of photosynthesis where light is required. So, light-dependent reactions. Here are the basics of the light-dependent reactions. Here's a chloroplast picture for you guys right here. So the light-dependent, this first stage takes place inside what we call the thylakoid of the chloroplast. So there, it's pointing to it right here. It's one of these tiny little discs is what they call a thylakoid. You don't necessarily need to know like the structure of a chloroplast or even be able to label it. All I want you guys to know is that the first stage of photosynthesis takes place inside one of these little discs, the thylakoid. The second stage takes place somewhere else, okay? So photosynthesis as a whole takes place in the chloroplast, but the first stage is even smaller inside this little thylakoid. So the molecules that are required for this first stage are water, obviously, and light, right? Because it's light dependent. And the molecules that are produced are oxygen gas and ATP. ATP, if you don't know what that is yet, don't worry about it. We're going to talk about it later in this video, but it is extremely essential and we haven't really touched on it yet. So we'll talk about it later. So here we're going to go a little bit more in detail. If you are more of a visual learner, this will kind of hopefully help. So here in this picture, we have the chloroplast, right? We have one of this thylakoid discs, and we're looking now inside of that thylakoid membrane. So we're just on the outer edge, just on the membrane of that thylakoid. And inside the membrane, that is where you will find a cluster of pigment molecules. And remember from your reading yesterday, you guys learned the specific type of pigment molecules that will make leaves green, right? And what pigment molecules were those? That's what I would say if I was in class. But you should have said chlorophyll right there, right? So these pigment molecules that we're talking about specifically today are going to be chlorophyll, okay? So there's chlorophyll inside the thylakoid membrane. That is where the light will all be concentrated to. So the light will strike the chlorophyll, and remember, it becomes excited, right? We learned about that. We saw that in the simulation, and so I kind of am showing that here with these orange circles. That just means that the chlorophyll has become excited, okay? If you don't really know what excited means, that's okay. Just know that it means that it's energized, it has received energy from something, okay? And it means it's become excited, right? So these chlorophyll pigments that are now excited will have the ability to release energy for the next few steps that we will see that are happening in the thylakoid. So now that they've received the energy from the sun, they will then be able to release it to allow the next few steps to happen. Okay, so the next few steps, if we're going now inside of the thylakoid, So here, this green oval is the thylakoid, and at the top here, pretend this is your cluster of molecules, okay, inside the membrane. And then we see these lightning bolts. Just pretend they're energy, okay? So energy is being released because the chlorophyll is excited. And so then water is able to split into oxygen gas. And also another reaction that is taking place inside the thylakoid that we haven't really talked about yet is ADP, which is a specific molecule, is being attached to a phosphate ion. So ADP and phosphate combine and they make what we now know as ATP. Okay, so those are the two things that happen inside the thylakoid, and basically because of the sunlight, those things are able to happen once the chlorophyll becomes excited. Okay, so now we have oxygen gas being released and we have ATP being created. So this right here, this slide just shows what I just said, but in writing. So if you're not really a visual learner and you want to see it written out, you can pause the video now and take a second to write this down. Okay? All right, so in summary, the energy from the sun is used to create these essential molecules inside the plant cells. So what are these essential molecules actually used for, right? And how do they contribute to the growth of the plant? So you guys are probably wondering, okay, there's all this tiny stuff, like these small reactions happening in the smallest parts of the plant, but how does that actually get us to what we see? How does that relate to turning a tiny seed into a huge tree, right? We know that it releases oxygen, which is good for humans, but how does that help the plant? So that's what we're going to continue to talk about, and hopefully this next slide will give you one tiny piece of the puzzle. So ATP, we're going to explain what that is. So here's a picture of it. You don't need to know the structure of it or like what it looks like really, just know that ATP, the name for it is adenosine triphosphate. Okay, that's why it's called that. It has 3 phosphate groups. It's found in all living organisms and it's extremely essential. It's found in plants, it's found in animals, it's found in us. It's all over and it's essential. And it's so essential because it's able to store a lot of energy in its bonds. So remember in the chemical reactions unit, we talked about molecules having chemical potential energy that they can store in their bonds, right? And different molecules have different chemical potential energy. Well, ATP is one of those molecules that has one of the highest chemical potential energies that it's able to store. Okay, so it can carry a lot of energy. So for this reason, it's extremely essential for life processes. So I kind of think of it as like an energy shuttle. So you can think of ATP as this little truck here, and it's just carrying a whole bunch of energy all over your body, all over the plant, wherever it's needed, right? So it takes that energy and it carries it to where it's essential. And it's a really efficient process because that energy is concentrated and captured in this ATP molecule and then transferred to the places that it's needed in your body. Okay, so you can kind of think of it like a little energy shuttle. So ATP is taking that energy from the first stage, which you originally got from the sunlight. It's capturing that energy in its bonds as chemical potential energy, and then it's going to take that energy to the second stage of photosynthesis. Okay, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. We'll bring in glucose and carbon dioxide and see how those play a part in this. But all you need to know for now is the light-dependent part of photosynthesis and all of the chemistry behind it. So take notes on this video. You can rewatch it as many times as you want. And then just fill out the exit ticket on Schoology. And that is all the work that you'll have to do today. Cool. Thanks for watching.